Hello, hello
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
to another Thursday evening of fun festivities and craft alcohol
Shenanigans.
shenanigans.
Yes. We've actually already been drinking for a little while. We had a corporate event at 3:30 today where we were doing a mixology session. So we're excited for some wine. We're in Thursday night party mode.
I managed to not get egg white all over myself when I was mixing up cocktails earlier.
Yes.
By the skin of my teeth. The shaker tin exploded and it went that way instead of on me.
No, it didn't. It didn't explode at all.
I mean,
now you're just storytelling.
A little bit.
All right, we're going to give a couple minutes here as I see people still filtering in.
While you arrive, if you would be so kind as to let us know where you're joining from and
take our poll. I just launched a poll. We love seeing kind of what your current thoughts are on what we're tippling on tonight.
Yeah.
So let us know where you're joining from, what you're sipping on.
How's everyone hanging in there? We're going into week 10.
I've lost count.
Now.
I don't even know.
68 days, I think, of shelter in place here in San Francisco. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's getting a little old, isn't it?
It is. It is. Good to have a good quarantine.
Quarantine. All right. I say we get started because we are timely people. And as people filter in and join, that is fabulous.
They'll pick up.
That's right. All right. So welcome everyone. First things first, if this is your first time joining us here at the Crafty Cask, thank you, first of all. And if you've joined before and you're coming back for second, third, fourth, whatever number event,
yeah,
we love that. So thank you for coming back and telling your friends and joining us week after week. We have so much fun featuring different things. I'm Suzanne. I'm the founder of the Crafty Cask, whose mission is all about celebrating and supporting craft alcohol makers, whether it's delicious wine like our makers tonight. Sin Banderas team, give us a wave. There they are up there. Zanoli team, give us a wave. Yes, so supporting amazing makers like them, or distillers or brewers or cider makers. As long as it's craft, we are excited about it.
We're on board.
Yeah, and checking them out and sharing what we love with all of you. So that's me.
I'm Evan. I'm a certified sommelier and for the last 10 years, a bespoke wine tour guide. And I've spent years before that in the restaurant industry supporting wineries primarily that fitted a lot of the kind of the tenets of the Crafty Cask and what the mission of the Crafty Cask is. And so these virtual tasting events have been a really great opportunity for both of us to kind of combine our passion and knowledge and expertise and the ability to kind of convey and transmit the knowledge and information about the wonderful craft producers that we've been fans of for years to the consumers who are itching to find new things to fill their home bar with.
Absolutely, yeah. And so at the Crafty Cask, we used to do a popular kind of Meet the Maker series that was in person when we were allowed to all do that. But as our world got turned upside down, like Evan said, we decided to turn them virtual. And what we love about these events is it really gives us an opportunity to support these incredible craft makers by sharing their story and helping drive sales for them. So if you bought bottles for the event tonight, thank you for doing that. If you haven't bought bottles yet, we will do our best to make you jealous and inspire you to buy bottles after this.
Because these are some delicious wines.
They really are. We were sipping on some of them with our Coravin last night to remind ourselves of how delicious they are, and we were pretty excited. So yeah, and another thing we really love about these, and Evan can kind of speak to this because he gives live in-person tours for a living, is that, when you come to these events, you are guaranteed to meet the maker and get to know them and ask them your questions. And, if you've ever been on a wine tour and you're excited about meeting the maker, it doesn't happen all that often. They're making the wine.
Yeah, like
they're
1
busy.
out of 10 wine tours I bring people on, they'd be so fortunate as to have the winemaker grace their presence for 5 minutes. And then, they're busy people. They have things to do. And so we really hope that you enjoy that opportunity and
take advantage of it and ask your questions. And, we definitely don't want this to be a one-way conversation. So while we'll be continually kind of muting everyone throughout the night just to make sure we get rid of background noise, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions, or, throw it in the chat or whatever. We want this to be engaging and fun, not just us and the makers talking to all of you. We'll throw some links in too, so where you can buy these. And if you're having a great time tonight and you want to support us so we can keep doing these for free for our consumers and the people who are drinking, then we'll throw in our Venmo so you can give us a little virtual tip as well, which we appreciate.
Much obliged.
Even more than that, we appreciate you telling your friends, telling your family, sharing on social, and helping
Spread the love.
Build this virtual tasting community so we can all, from the comfort of our own homes, travel the world through delicious alcohol. Speaking of, why don't we all do a little cheers? Up to the camera. Yeah. Cheers, everyone. So thank you for joining us. And if you do have, oh, I'm not drinking. I get in trouble a lot because I'm such a talker that once I toast, I just keep talking and I forget to take a sip, and Evan always yells at me. And so if you're also having fun tonight, make sure to check out our future events next week. We're doing a vodka tasting with fair drinks and rapscallion spirits. If you think all vodka tastes like nothing or is only for cocktails, the craft revolution is changing that. So that's going to be a really fun one. We also have
followed by, let's see, what are we doing after that?
Pacific Northwest cider tasting.
Yeah, a bunch of great ciders from up in the PNW.
Yep, a bourbon versus rye showdown. That might be before, actually. We're doing a whiskey and vodka tasting the day before Father's Day with Charbet Distillery. So bring your dads, have
some
a fun
California
experience.
Cabernets. Yeah, check out the calendar events on our page where you registered to sign up to join us tonight. And there's lots more fun events coming up. So
with that, let's start talking Rhone varietals.
Let's talk about the Rhone. So obviously we're not drinking wines from the Rhone tonight, but I think Sint van Darsen and Zenoli would agree that the influence of the wines from that region is a big part of the reason why they make the wines that they make and why they make them the way that they make them. So the Rhone is a river and a valley and a region in France that has a lot of influence on the way wines are made all over the world. Primary varietals there are Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, Viognier, Grenache Blanc, Roussanne, Marsanne. Today we're going to be focusing kind of primarily on Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. And conveniently, those wines or those grapes go into a very common blend using those three grapes. And we're featuring tonight a rosé made from all three, a single varietal example of Syrah, a single varietal example of Mourvedre, and then a blend of Syrah and Mourvedre. Commonly, Rhone wines are blends. It's at least in much of the Rhone. You don't see a lot of single varietal wines with the exception of Syrah in the northern part of that valley. And the influence of each one of those individual grapes on the blends that are made with them is a really fun opportunity to kind of deconstruct and learn a little bit more about maybe why you like those blends and maybe what parts of those blends you enjoy, and as an extension of that, why you might enjoy the single varietal expressions of the grapes that give the blends those characteristics that you enjoy. As we do this and kind of go through the wines that we're tasting here, please feel free to chime in to comment on other wines that you've had that are similar to this, and expressions that you've found to be influential to yourself, because I imagine that for those of you that are here, this isn't the first GSM or Syrah or any of these individual wines that you've had before. So we'd love to kind of have a communal kind of understanding and experience of what these wines mean to you.
And I'm going to try my hardest not to wax poetic, because I was lucky enough to spend, gosh, almost a month in the northern
so
Rhone,
jealous.
in the northern Rhone Valley 2 summers ago, and got to live in Lyon for a few weeks and got to know it pretty well and had a lot of fun. And so I'm really excited to find some similar style wines here from local craft makers, because man, they're they're quite delicious. So yeah.
Mm.
Speaking of,
Speaking of,
did you want to talk about GSM any more than you already did
Yeah.
about like why that has become so popular? And
sure. I guess it's important to note that in recent years, wine blends have become very popular. Um, partially because of their versatility and partially because of their, I guess, price point, approachability. Now, it's an interesting kind of perception that unfortunately a lot of people share, that blends are for some reason seen as inherently inferior wines.
people feel this way about Scotch too,
Yeah.
about like it just for whatever reason people think like single varietal or single pureness is like better than blends, and that's not true.
Yeah. Despite the fact that some of the most expensive wines in the world are blends, and there's reason behind that. There are a lot of blends that are made with kind of the leftover wine that doesn't quite measure up to what they want to put in their varietal bottlings. And the market has kind of been flooded with wines like this in recent years. But if you think about it, you take a single varietal and you tend to it carefully and you bring it to its fruition. It's filling in the certain pockets of flavors and aromas and characteristics that varietal is capable of filling in. And then when you blend two varietals together, you can create a more cohesive and integrated kind of expression of wine as a whole, perhaps. And so both blends and single varietal expressions of wine really have a lot of tenets to be appreciated. Single varietal wines can be a really great exploration into a kind of a category or a taste profile, and blended wines are a great opportunity to see how those flavor profiles can meld together to create something that is almost hard to discern and break apart, which, I don't know, for me, I love when I can sit down with a wine and it isn't immediately presenting to me what it is, where it's from, how old it is, what it tastes like. When it's kind of an exploration where you have to like have a conversation with the wine in order to be able to really find out what it is to yourself and what it actually is comprised of, it is a lot of fun. So yeah, GSMs as like a broad category, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, really have a wonderful kind of interplay together. Grenache contributes a lot of bright red fruit. Grenache tends to be relatively low in tannins and low in acid. And Syrah oftentimes has a little bit more of a myriad of fruit flavors. You've got red fruit, but you've also got blue fruit and black fruit. And you start to, behind the fruit, recognize some elements of savory characteristics, things like notes of olives or cured meats, or gosh, what are some other fun Syrah components? Maybe some leather, some white pepper spice. And then you move into Mourvedre, which is often kind of overlooked as a varietal wine, but it plays a really cool like base layer in a lot of these blends that, because it's not as prevalent and as recognizable, because you don't see a lot of single varietal expressions of it today, which is one of the reasons I'm really excited that that's one of the wines we're featuring and we're showcasing. Mourvedre has a lot of dark fruit. It's a lot more tannic, and it really is driven by these like root and bark and like almost kind of like molasses undertone flavors. And collectively, when you put, if you can imagine like building a cake or having those as the layers that you slice through and then take a bite of, the blends run these really fun gambits. So yeah, that's I guess kind of the high level elements of why I think Rhone wines and wines that are reflective of the wine growing or the grape growing and wine growing traditions found there. For example, the wonderful wines from Zinbanderas and Zinoli that we're going to be tasting and talking about tonight. So yeah, I think that's a good opportunity for you to share a little about your time there, right?
In the Rhone Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I'm going to be interested to hear about this a little bit from Zinoli and Zinbanderas, just because one of the most distinct features. I probably should have pulled some pictures together to like show, but that's not the point of this. But anyways, one of the most distinct features, especially in the northern Rhone, is the way the vineyards are laid out, and there are these terraces upon terraces up these ridiculously steep mountains or hills. And they have to be terraced, or at least they used to have to be terraced in order to like really allow the vines not to slip down the side of the mountain.
They're that steep.
I mean, some of them that weren't terraced that I was standing at the top of, it literally was like if you leaned forward too much, you felt like you were going to roll right down the hill. And they all, they all have these sweeping views. You go up on these hills that are covered with these vines and these lush grapes hanging from them. And then down below are these like medieval looking little towns with the church spires and the stone and it's just incredible. And, I know one of the unique things about the Rhone region is the soil that's there. And that's, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is your area of expertise, not mine, but that's why certain areas of the Rhone Valley, like you only make Viognier here, you only see Syrah here, because it's just the characteristic that the soil brings for that one particular type of grape is just like so glorious, I guess, that it's like, why would you plant anything else here?
And the endeavor across the rest of the globe to find places that mimic
that. And that's what I'm interested to hear a little bit about tonight, because I don't think we necessarily have these steep, crazy cliffs. So I'm just curious, like how that impacts the wine and all that. And I think that's going to be fun to explore.
Yeah, I think that the elements of the climate that you see in places like the Yakima Valley and in Paso Robles too, because another defining characteristic of the Rhone is these intense, powerful winds that flood through the valley. They're so notable that they actually have a name, the Mistral winds. And these winds are pretty vital to cool the grapes off because it gets hot there. I mean, the Mediterranean, when you're close to the sea, that helps a lot. But as soon as you start moving inland and away from the sea, pretty toasty. And so without these cooling effects of the winds that blow down through this valley, the grapes would get overworked and they'd get overtired. And I'm curious to learn more about those kind of defining characteristics and how the approach to making wine and growing grapes in Yakima Valley and Paso Robles influenced your decisions to grow
these types of grapes.
And plant these types of grapes.
Yeah, for sure. But I think with that, we should jump in. Right? And start drinking here and start learning about what we're drinking.
We poured a little rosé because that seemed like the appropriate thing to start with.
Yeah, we're going to, and Kristen just asked me privately, but it's a good question for everyone and we didn't give the rundown. So we're going to start with Zinbanderas because we want to start with the rosé. That seems like the right thing to start with. And interestingly, the rosé is actually a GSM blend. Right. And so that's pretty fun. And then we'll move on to the next Zinbanderas, which is the blend,
and Mourvedre.
The Syrah and Mourvedre blend. And so we'll do that next. And then we're going to keep in mind what that kind of tasted like, and then break that down and drink the Syrah and the Mourvedre individually from Zinoli. So,
and of course, being from different places, the Syrah and Mourvedre that are used to make the blend from Zinbanderas would be different,
of course,
consumed on their own. But it's kind of a fun little insight and a wink and a nod to where and why these grapes were combined together, and then how they get to be experienced on their own.
Yeah, for sure. And especially since Mourvedre, you don't drink alone all that often. So that's just a treat in itself to be able to taste that grape variety on its own. So yes. So I think we can start with Zinbanderas. And so if you guys want to kind of unmute yourselves there.
Susan, Elise, Jackie, whoever is.
Hopefully. Okay, I'm just going to go anyways. We are Zinbanderas. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you to all the people who are tuning in. I see Ohioans, I see Texans, and South Carolinians.
Arizonans.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, so we're Sin Banderas Wines. We started as a group of people working together at Owen Row Winery, which is where we are now because we don't have our own winery. We're very small. We make about 300 cases a year. You know, the goal of Sin Banderas is just to make good wine for ourselves, essentially, and for our friends. And you know, and it's grown from that into being, you know, a little bit bigger, but it's a side project for all the people involved. We all have full-time jobs, and you know, we do it because we enjoy drinking wine. So let me introduce the people who are here. I am Elise Woda. I do the marketing, IT, and creative endeavors for the company. This is Jackie Evans. She is the brain of the operation. She makes our delicious wine. And this is Susan. She is our community relations. Yeah, Susan plays a bunch of different roles, but she's been a longtime supporter. And we appreciate having her here too. So yeah, Sin Banderas started here at Owen Row, and if you've seen our label, Sin Banderas means without flags in Spanish. And on the back of the label, that gets explained a little bit more. So it started with 4 people. There was it was cultivated by a Mexican, vinified by a Texan, cellared by a Frenchman, and distributed by a Washingtonian. So the idea is that there are all these people from around the world, and it doesn't matter where you're from or what language you speak or what your values and beliefs are. Like, we just kind of want to come together to make good wine, and that's what really bonded the group in the beginning. And so we've just been riding on that since then. So I'm actually was a newer recruit to the brand. I'm from Ohio, so shout out to all my Ohio people. And I've been helping them do you know, the marketing IT stuff for a while now.
And I have to say, I love, so two things. I went to Thunderbird, and for people who aren't familiar with Thunderbird as the business school, it's in Arizona actually, but it's a global business program basically. And so there's more international students who go to that school than there are domestic students. And so we are like without borders and without, so when I first heard about what your brand means, I actually posted it on my alumni group because I was like, T-Birds, like, this is your wine brand, like, this is what we're all about, you know? And so that really resonates with me. And then your label as well. Evan and I had a whole 20-minute conversation about your label one night, just casually, and that is the sign of like great marketing. So I just want to say that because, and we were kind of looking at it and being like, so it reminds me of kind of like a Psychology ink blot a little bit, where different people could see different things in it, and like, what are you seeing in it, and what am I seeing in it? And then we were tying it to like what your brand name Sin Banderas means, and how that could like, and that was influencing what we saw in it. Yeah. And it was just fun. And it's like, that's a sign of great marketing and great logo design and everything. So it's just beautiful.
Well, that was kind of funny how it happened too. Like, so our friends who are graphic designers did the label for us, and we just told them the brand name, and we're like, yeah, run with whatever you think.
No, there's no. Well, the ship kind of represents that we all came from different places, and the tree represents we all land here in the Pacific Northwest. And
yeah,
and I love trees.
Yeah, and so we were very fortunate to have people who could make such a great label for us. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to hold this up to for people who don't have it with them so they can see it a little more clearly. But so you can see how like you can almost see different things in it. And so I saw a ship with a reflection that looked like a tree to me, and then I think you saw something else.
I saw a ship that had roots.
Yeah, he thought the tree was like a root.
Yeah, I like that.
And then he could kind of,
so something that has, you know, has a base and like a structure, but is kind of mobile,
floating and
retains that
Mm-hmm.
fundamental characteristic because it's rooted in its
Yeah.
mobility perhaps.
Right. Well, and two, I mean, the people that are involved in the brand have roots in different places all over the world. And because of that, they're able to bring these different talents and skills and experience to the table and make this wine this really kind of like, diverse and interesting thing, by incorporating different elements of their winemaking. Yeah, their expertise. And styles from, different places around the world. Our Frenchman grew up in.
Well, he was born in Madagascar and grew up in Tahiti.
Yeah.
And then studied in Bordeaux.
Wow.
In Washington.
Yeah.
But he's not here.
Yeah, he's a little bit shy, but we get him on camera sometimes.
The French,
They're mysteries.
They are indeed an enigma. Well, Jackie is an amazing winemaker with an amazing reputation in this valley, which is basically the breadbasket and place where Washington state wine is grown. So she runs a tight ship, speaking of ships, here at Owen Rowe, and still finds time to make this incredible wine. But the rosé is, I think, one of the most refreshing rosés that I've had. It's everything you'd like in a rosé. It has enough fruit on the nose to really dazzle, but yet is very, very quaffable and just light and easy to drink, which I think is what you look for in rosé. It strikes that balance between light and refreshing and actually having quite a bit of complexity. So I just sat down here earlier and started sniffing and went, oh, I haven't smelled that before. It's pretty delicious, and it just keeps getting better, which is the mark of any good wine. So yeah.
If you want to, feel free to keep talking about the rosé, so people who are sipping on it, we can talk a little bit about the grape varietals that are in it and the blend and how you guys decided to make it out of those 3 grapes. We can kind of duck into the tastings as you're telling your story, that as it fits naturally. That's totally fine.
Yeah, and I very much agree that like this rosé has a depth to it that you don't often find with rosés. They're generally quaffable and refreshing, and that's generally why I'm opening them.
Yeah.
But it is really a kind of a pleasant surprise to have a rosé that has a little bit more to offer.
Exactly. Well said.
Brandon.
Sorry, we're laughing.
No, it's okay. You guys sent me some photos, but then I also went to the Facebook page and grabbed a few that tickled me.
So the rosé is predominantly Grenache, Mourvedre, Syrah, and also a little bit of Cinsault in it. And it's stainless steel fermented. And we just wanted something that we could, perfect backyard wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spend most of the days in the summer outside in the backyard in the Yakima sun, which if you haven't been here before, it can get brutal.
Oh boy.
It's hot. So having something that's refreshing is really important. And I think this one hits the mark on just being like having a very good flavor without being over the top.
And good acidity.
Yeah.
Very good acidity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The acidity is
Lovely.
It's, I think, what just makes it, it's like the cherry on top.
But it's nice because it also still has a little bit of sweetness to it, which I really appreciate, because I feel like for a while there, people were poo-pooing rosés for just being like too sweet for so long, that then a lot of makers went to the like way other extreme and made them so bone dry. And then it wasn't like that enjoyable to me. And so this is a really nice balance of like, it's dry, it's crisp, it's refreshing, but there's a little sweetness that comes in that kind of helps bring it all together that I really appreciate.
But yeah,
Yeah.
The
Yeah, we left just a tiny bit of sugar in there to balance out the acidity. I mean, Jack did. I didn't do anything with the wine. But no, I think you balanced it so well.
Well, balance is really important.
And,
oh, there it is, going through the bottling.
Yeah.
yeah.
The tartness of this I find to be surprising too, because I don't generally associate any of the 3 grapes that are used to make this as having like a prominent level of acidity, the way that, perhaps Pinot Noir is known to be a pretty acidic grape on its own. So, and especially in a warm climate like the Yakima Valley, I mean, kudos. It's really quite a delight.
Thank you.
When you guys were deciding to make this, I mean, did you ever have the conversation like, we want to make a GSM rosé, or like, how did you choose these three, or we want to use Rhone varietal grapes, or was it just like, that just happens to be what it happened to be? Or like, how did that decision get made?
Well, our first vintage ever was in 2015, and we made just the Syrah Mourvedre blend. And then our first rosé was 2017, and we did a Syrah Mourvedre rosé, and we thought it would just be kind of fun to do. And then I decided I really wanted some Grenache in there. So that's what we started doing the next year.
Great.
Cool.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Well, it works, and I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, if anyone's sipping on the rosé, we'd love to hear what you're thinking too, and in the chat box or wherever.
Okay, I'm just gonna say, I had rosé in the past, never liked it until this.
Oh,
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's a nice thing to say.
it was amazing. And what Jackie has done with that is, I just think it's like the best thing. When they first told me about this rosé, I was like, yeah, no, I don't do that. And then I got a bottle of it. I'm like, this is amazing. It's so good.
That's funny you say that, because we've heard that a lot. We do a lot of tasting events, so people are like, oh, I'm not a rosé, I don't like sweet wine. And then we're like, I try to be just take one sip for me, like, just for me, do it. And they'll try it and be like, oh wow, I actually, like, this is up my alley more than they thought it would be. Just because I think there's this idea, that rosé is sweet, and it doesn't have to be. It can be anything
Suzanne,
the maker wants it to be.
Sure.
Suzanne,
Go ahead. Yep, we can hear you.
I think her opinion might be a little biased because it's her mother.
Yeah,
I'm calling her out.
yeah. I got a lot of family on this call.
But it's
But
true,
still.
you hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You do. You hear people have already preconceived notions about a lot of wine, actually. But rosé is and Riesling, I think, are two that perception holds pretty rooted.
Yep.
So it's nice to actually introduce people to a wine that they never knew they always wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. People,
Yeah, we can thank Bob Trincaro for that perception of any wine that's pink in the United States, at least, I guess.
Oh.
Thank you very little.
Yeah.
But
But
at the same time,
That
it's
could be
funny because-
breaking the surface on that and changing people's ideals by just forcing wine into their hands at tasting events. You'll have it. Yeah.
It's funny too because I agree in a certain capacity, and at the same time, like how many wine drinkers period had Sutter Home White Zinfandel as their gateway,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
how much we have to thank him for at least getting them in the door. And while they might not drink that anymore, and I would hope most of them don't,
Mhm.
that's how they arrived. And whatever fashion you get there in is
You
not
have to start
necessarily the way
somewhere.
that you leave.
Yeah, you have to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another
True.
little side story is, so actually when I moved to Washington, I was a box wine kind of gal, had the tap going and all that. And I met Jackie on Craigslist looking for a room because I was desperate to find a place to live, because I'm from Ohio and I needed a place to live. And she took me in and introduced me to wine, and now we're business partners. And it's hard. You can't go back once you've had good wine. You're like, oh, I've tasted the good life.
I'm spoiled.
Very
Very
true.
spoiled out, but yeah, I personally had that, that journey, and it's been very enlightening.
Yeah, I always say, and people who join these calls regularly are soon going to get sick of me always saying this. But
I won't get sick of it though, never.
that's what, you've heard them the most of all. But especially because, working in craft alcohol, I meet a lot of people who are like, I don't like gin. I don't like Merlot. It's mezcal's not for me, you know, and they're just like have completely written off an entire category of alcohol. And so I always say, I'm like, you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince.
Yeah,
man. Like, don't
Absolutely.
stop. Like
Mhm.
persistence. Like do not give up on the booze. Like just keep going. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people can make alcohol.
Yeah.
But, you know, the good alcohol is like, you just kind of got to search for it.
Right.
Yeah, and especially with the craft revolution, and you know, you guys are part of this. The spectrum for each category of alcohol has broadened so much. So, you know, 20 years ago, what White Zinfandel was, which is technically rosé, right? Like was so narrow and so like this is what it is, and all of them tasted almost identical, and that's what it was. And consumers love that because it's like no matter what brand I buy, it tastes pretty much the same. But like
Mhm.
if you didn't like that, there was no option for you. And so now like the craft revolution has really started to like just be creative and just start to play with the boundaries. And gin is a great example of that because it used to be most gins were super juniper heavy. And now like there are some where I can't even taste the juniper in them, you know? And so
Yeah.
it's fun to see. And that's why I'm always encouraging people, like if your perception of any type of alcohol is from something you took a sip of like more than 5 years ago, it's time
Mhm.
to give
Yeah,
it a
revisit.
Yeah. I always say, don't believe everything you think. It's not, and this is why we have spit buckets, right? I mean, if you don't like it or it's not pleasing, then don't, you know, you don't have to go the full
Right.
Monty. But it's really important to try, especially in places like here in Yakima and Washington State. People are doing very innovative, interesting things. So. Yeah, we have interns from around the world that always bring something interesting and new to the table. So they learn from us, we learn from them, and it really just does inform a real global perspective of good wine. So I think it's important to educate people.
for sure. And that's what we're all about. at the
Yeah,
Graphic
opening the
Ask. So
doors
we're-
and doing the wine tours over the years, you know, I certainly very strongly demanded that people try everything that's being offered. There's
Right.
Mhm.
no skin off your back. You're paying the, you know,
Tasting fee
$10
anyways.
tasting fee, regardless of if you.
$10. Where are you bringing these?
Well, not in
people?
Napa.
Like $50. Like, geez.
You know, whether you try 7 of the wines that they have available or 2. So try them all.
Right.
You don't have to,
You
you're not
might be
committing to a
surprised.
bottle. You're trying a, you know, a 1 ounce taste.
And that's the whole point.
Yeah,
Take
you're
it-
not damaging your palate either. It's like you're expanding it. You're,
Right.
for sure.
you're
And it's
exposing
all
yourself.
subjective. So
Mhm.
one you know,
Yeah.
definitely. So, and it's part of the journey of educating people in the proper way to taste it and to let them give them permission to go, nope.
Mhm. Yeah, and when people do that, I say that's totally fine.
Yeah.
You like what you like,
Absolutely.
For sure.
but you know, like maybe you'd like this better, and I'll give them, you know, something different. But
Sure.
I'm a huge believer in it's like you like what you like, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind on anything. But I just
Yeah,
ask them
definitely.
to try it.
But just
Yeah.
try.
I want to let Russ break in here. I know Russ has a comment. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, I'm her dad, but I'm not biased. I'm just here.
Man, parents can be the harshest critics sometimes, you know?
That's
Like,
And the biggest supporters.
yeah, but they
Yeah.
I'm very objective, but you
So
know,
if I could actually say
we're way back. We're way back here in the East in Ohio, and we don't really see the quality of wine development the way you all get to see it every single day up the you know, the micro ecosystems that are moving up and down through Yakima, Napa, and all those places. And when I go out and sell my daughter's wine, I tell people this is not the Behringer of the gas station that we used to drink when we were teenagers. You know, that, I mean, she's too young to know that, and most of you probably are too young to know that. But, you know, there was a time you'd go to a there was a time you'd go to a gas station in Ohio, you get a half a gallon of Behringer rosé for $6, and you know that was the rosé, and that was something to drink for the rest of the night. But now it's a complex wine that's fun, and it's on the top of the list in terms of pairing it with a food and really kind of you know, it's a whole different animal that I don't think would happen if it wasn't for all of you guys out west. And I really enjoyed it, and I promoted pretty hard back here because I think people just don't know that. It's kind of new back here to see a rosé as something we would even spend an hour talking about. Why would you talk about it?
Yeah, do you think you would have bought a rosé wine 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Would you have even considered it?
I think if you weren't doing this, I would have never bought a rosé.
Yeah.
It's just not on my radar.
Yeah.
That's something when I walk into a wine store, it's not on my radar.
You're a red guy. And I know that about you. You're a red guy.
I am a big red guy, but this is a different kind of red guy thing. This is kind of what I would call the medium red guy thing, where the complexities of those big reds that your mom and I really, really love is a little bit lighter. You know, I almost call it lawnmower wine, where I've been out on my tractor mowing the lawn for a couple hours, and it's time for a glass of wine, and I don't want garbage. I want something that tastes really refreshing, and that's what I would call this. So that's my 2 cents on it. And I'm not a wine guy, and I'm not very smart about wines, but I do find this to be very interesting that this has resurged as something really, really interesting.
Yeah.
For sure. Hey, Shelly, I just wanted to check in on you. I saw you had your hand up before. Did you want to break in and make a comment?
Yes, Jimmy had a question for them.
Sure.
So, ladies, the question is, you intentionally came out to make a rosé. Are you more of a fan of wines made specifically for rosés that go direct to press, or do you like to saunier, or a combination of both?
Well, this wine is a Saunier because it's free.
Jackie, can you explain a little bit what Saunier process is and what the other processes are for creating a rosé?
Yes. So one way to make rosé is going direct to press. So you would pick your grapes early, send them to the press, let them sit to soak up some color, and then basically make the wine as a white wine. Whereas what we did with this, the Saunier method, Owen Rowe had red grapes coming in, and we basically bled off some of the juice to concentrate the Owen Rowe wines. And this would have gone in the trash, but we decided to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're small and on a budget.
Yeah.
And this made a lot of sense. And, I think turned, turned something that was going to go in the, into the garbage into something that was like really special and delicious.
Hey, Shelly and Jimmy, I'm curious, are you guys familiar, since you're down in Paso Robles, are you familiar with Refined Spirits?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so they have a winery. I forget what the name of their winery is, but
I want to say yes.
but they didn't want to make a rosé, but they were concentrating their red wines, and so they took their Saunier essentially and distill it into spirits. And so their vodka is grape-based. It's basically taking Saunier, what you would turn into rosé if they went down that process, but they decided to distill it instead. And so that's
Interesting.
interesting use of something that would normally go to trash.
Is that it's the tea?
It's Refined Spirits.
No, the winery.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, yeah. You do that.
But speaking of red wines and concentrating flavors and all that good stuff, let's move on to your blend and tell us a little bit about that.
And actually, just briefly before we get to that, I had a question here that came through that someone was curious about getting your wines and was wondering about shipping during the summer months. Do you have a cold chain shipping option by chance, or what would you recommend for someone that wanted to get some of this rosé to enjoy during these hot summer months?
Our shipping company does have those options. It is pricier, of course, but they could just reach out to us and we'll make it happen.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But order early before it gets too hot.
Yeah, that's
already
true.
hot.
Yeah, it's already hot some places.
It's in Arizona, so it's already triple digits.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm headed there.
Hard. Curbside delivery.
Yeah. If it's in Arizona, I'll bring it. I'm going next week.
So our 17 red is 67% Syrah, 33% Mourvedre. And it was 6 barrels, which is 150 cases. And I spent about a year and a half in French oak with 17% new French oak from T.N. Coopers. It's one of our favorite coopers. They use French oak, but they're based out of South America.
Or Coravinning, because we can't open 5 bottles of wine tonight and drink them all, or 4 bottles.
Are you sure you can drink them all? Come on.
Yeah, but we also already had a cocktail event earlier today,
That's true.
and
Yeah. So you're feeling good.
And we feel like we essentially drink for a living, so you know.
Very nice.
Yeah. Found a good line of work. That's what it sounds like.
For those of you who join our tastings regularly, I feel like this is a challenge for a lot of people where they're like, wow, we're tasting through 4 bottles of wine. I don't want to open 4 bottles of wine. The Coravin is a little pricey, but it's pretty awesome to be able to just, and especially like if you have a nice bottle of wine, you just want to have a glass of it and like save the rest for later. The other method we do, just to share knowledge, that's the more affordable option, is we get those little glass jars that have the swivel tops on them that like seal tight. And as long as you just fill that bottle all the way to the top and leave like no airspace in and crank it down good and put it in your fridge, that does a pretty damn good job of preserving the wine for a couple of days. Just buy different sizes of them. So if you drink a quarter of the bottle or half the bottle, or, you know, so you have the different sizes.
the whole idea is just removing air from the headspace in the bottle.
Right. Yeah. Nice to have those options.
For sure.
You were talking about the varietals earlier, Evan, and you hit on something, and something came up for me when you were talking about that, and talking about how the different varietals and people so desire a single varietal, but I keep seeing this flash of the yin and yang when it comes to especially this wine, which for about 8 months I was no longer able to talk about, actually, because I was unable to talk about it in a rated G fashion. It hit me at a very cellular level, shall we say. It's 2 of my favorite varietals, which I frequently enjoy on their own, and more and more places are featuring these varietals done on their own, just because they're grown with such success here. But this blend complements each other so beautifully, and it always makes me think of a good marriage. I mean, what one person has, the other might, and it's just perfectly in sync. And I know, you being in the industry, you've probably smelled and tasted something that's made you actually weaken your knees, which is what this wine has done for me every vintage that Jackie has made. She's got a gift, I think, for just like bringing out the best in the wines and in the blends and creating a perfect balance. So I've had the great pleasure in my life to taste and travel and taste a lot of really good wine, and I've never had something love at first sight kind of happen with this, and that's all I will say, because I'm not sure if there are kids here, but
there probably shouldn't be, so I feel like
I don't know if they're running around in the background, but anyway, I feel like the Syrah and Mourvedre perfectly represent what they are individually, but are so much better together.
They complement each
They
other.
complement each other just perfectly.
Well, and then every vintage, the ratio has been slightly different, right? So,
well, a little, but not so much.
But
it seems like.
but those 2 together have been really good.
Yeah.
And you have seen you've tried all the vintages.
All the
You've been here from
vintages.
since the beginning.
Yeah. And all the vintages have been great. I was watching some funny little podcast about French dressing, and there was a gal who was talking about the perfect pair of jeans. And I thought about this wine in the middle of the podcast, because this is actually like the perfect pair of jeans in
Yeah.
a bottle.
Yeah.
Like if I'm whatever I'm having, it always seems to complement whatever food I'm serving. It's always the red that I want, and it's quickly become sort of the bar where I hold other wines too. But it's a delicious wine.
And I
We're
have,
not paying her to say that.
I-
Also, she showed up here on her own.
of my own accord.
and I have to say what I love about it on the nose and on the palate, there's something kind of savory about it. Like,
Yes.
like on the nose, it was like at first cheesy, and then I was almost like
Meaty.
cheeseburgery or like blue cheese
Yeah.
on a steak, like something just like really like savory, and it's so lovely.
What I was struck by was the trajectory of this wine over the course of, I don't know, maybe 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And initially when it hit the glass, it was pretty linear. It was pretty focused, pleasant, and enjoyable. But as those lines and as those contrasting kind of components started to fade and started to like blend and reach out, with each passing sip, the time from one sip to the next would stretch further and further.
Yeah.
Yes.
It evolves
Wait a
in
minute.
really interesting
Wait a
ways.
minute.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, like when we first opened it up, I was like, oh, there's some like chocolatey flavors,
Yeah.
like some cocoa or something, and then it goes into like an umami-ish.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's a very, I feel like the flavors are really dynamic, but they're always really good.
Yeah, and I feel Mourvedre oftentimes acts like an enigma to me. I'm always sort of chasing after it because my brain doesn't actually go bum 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 bum. With Mourvedre, for some reason, it's always been that way, and it's just, and so I love that experience with Mourvedre. But then here you have the Syrah, just like this.
Like
Anyway.
propping it up like a little pedestal. and,
Yeah,
like, supporting
saying
it.
just do your beautiful dance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, got you.
Okay. Now I'm slipping into the territory.
Yeah, it's really quite lovely. And I want to kind of do something different than what we normally do. So I don't want to cut you ladies short, and we'll have plenty of time to keep chit-chatting and hearing more about your story. But I do kind of want to jump over to Shelly and Jimmy and just open your two wines first. And just because we have this in front of us right now, so if people could grab an extra glass if they have other glasses, because I think it could just be really fun to taste what these varietals and totally different winemakers and totally different approaches and regions, and that's all matters. But like, I would love to just taste your two wines side by side with this, and then we can kind of talk your story and hear all about Fedoli. Is that okay with you guys if we switch it up a little bit?
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, especially because they were just saying how this feels like they think it like really highlights the beauty of each varietal individually. So I would love to just taste each varietal individually and see what they taste like in comparison, even though I was just drinking your wines last night and I know very well what they taste like. Yeah. Evan's grabbing us more glasses. I'm screwing things up here. We're not prepared. But yeah, Shelly, so should we start with your Mourvedre first? Or should we do that one?
Actually, we're gonna do Syrah.
Okay. Let's do
Yeah. The Syrah, I think, would be best for.
Right. Good idea. Good idea.
Okay.
So tell us about this lovely Syrah.
So the Syrah comes from out on the west side of Paso Robles. So there's two main arteries that come in from the west and the east into Paso Robles, and then there's the 101 freeway divides the two sides of Paso Robles. And so both the Syrah and the Mourvedre that you guys will be trying today come from the west side, and they both come from the same vineyard. It's called Glen Rose. Oh, Kitty, hi.
Hi, Kitty.
Not feral cat, not so feral, but.
And so You were mentioning earlier about how there's some steep slopes in the region, and actually this vineyard also, it looks like Machu Picchu.
Oh.
Super steep. It was terraced in the mid 80s by the farmer himself with intentions to plant vines there. You couldn't do it if you hadn't terraced it. Oh, and so it's all on.
Sorry, he's allergic.
Salacious soils, some limestone type soils. And so, although we get a lot of heat days and days, you know, at 100 degrees or more for maybe 2 to 3 weeks out of the growing season, we also get the diurnal temperature swing as we're only 15 miles from the ocean. So we're getting those similar winds off the ocean that cool down the nights as well. It'll be 100 degrees during the day and 50 degrees at night. So you always, you know, take a jacket when you leave. But I think that can lend to, if you choose to make a leaner style of wine and pastorals, although the traditional style is to make it big and full and robust, you can show some restraint. And for our style wines, we tend to do that. In addition to that, this Syrah was done with some whole clusters, so it was not destemmed. It's just a style of wine that I like. I love wines from Cornas.
Yeah.
And so I play around with that, with the
So
stems in this particular.
Do you
Go
feel
ahead.
like the vineyard, based on the steepness and the weather, is pretty similar to what you would find in Cornas, or what do you think about that?
Pretty close. Pretty
Huh.
close.
I have a photo. I don't know how to share it, but I do, of the vineyard.
I think you should be able to share your screen if you go in the bottom middle there.
It says you.
Do you see the
Host
little
here.
green up arrow?
Here, I just made you a co-host.
All
should
right,
be
now
able
you can
to-
share.
You should be able to share now.
Can you see the little green icon at the bottom there?
There we
There
go.
we are.
Can you see it?
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's not dissimilar to some of those regions around Cornas and Hermitage.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So there's another ridge line they call the pipeline that's to the right of the photo that leads to that. And it's roughly at the very top, it's about 1,900 feet in elevation, and then it drops down to about 800 feet in elevation.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fun vineyard to be able to be in. When we moved back home in 2015 from Napa, I searched out this vineyard because, you know, I've heard about this vineyard a million times. I've had wine from the vineyard, and I think given the climate and the soil types, this Syrah plays very well in that vineyard.
Yeah.
Jimmy, can you just maybe explain at a high level the, I guess, conceptual differences in the approach to whole cluster and not, and also the influence on the flavor profile and like body and mouthfeel and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, absolutely. So destemming the grapes tends to not lend as many tannins to
Right.
the wine, and it doesn't play with the pH of the wine. So you won't get, sometimes earlier on when you put a wine in the bottle that is whole cluster, it can come across as astringent or green. Evan, you talked about the olive tapenade profile that you can get on a wine. And I get that a lot when I have wines that are made with stem inclusion. And so being that's typically what they do in Gigondas, I like that profile. So that's why I went with that on the Syrah for the first couple of years. But, you know, destemming it, I like that it brings more of those meaty characteristics in, like cured meats, charcuteries, kind of gamey meat profile. You won't get, yeah, that I don't pick up on when you do, you know, something that's just destemmed.
Okay.
and even if you could do a 50-50 blend, of destemmed and stem inclusion and kind of put those together, that's a fun blend to play with. But definitely including the stems when they are lignified will add a harsh tannin initially, and also potassium will change the pH of the wine. It will give it just a different profile from the start.
It's funny that you mentioned the lignification too, because that's something I hear about whole cluster fermentation frequently, or I guess more frequently with producers of Syrah than I feel like I do with a lot of other varietals. And the idea of not only grape ripeness and phenolic ripeness in the grapes, but also ripeness of the stem itself is something that I find fascinating, to the extent that like I hear about winemakers that go out there and they'll like pull off a few clusters or a few grapes from the cluster and then pull out a piece of the stem and chew on it and taste it and like, is this still too green? Has it become kind of lignified and woody enough so that it's not going to impart those harsh bitter characteristics that it would if I picked it, a week ago?
Right. And sometimes your window is that small. It could be a week in between when it's not lignified and it is, and it's just something that you got to pay attention to. And quite frankly, it does not happen every year. Sometimes, most of the time it does, but there's sometimes it doesn't. And I know when I worked for Aaron Jordan up in Napa, he went for it every year, no matter if it was lignified or not. And his vineyard was maybe probably 4 miles from the Sonoma coast. And, heat days aren't as, there isn't as many heat days out there. So oftentimes it was not lignified, but it still gave such a distinct characteristic, including those stems, that I kind of, drank the Kool-Aid and believed it. So I also agree. Just go for it.
I always thought that was a pretty astounding place to try and grow Syrah for him. I mean, yeah, I know it was like high elevation, and so the fog wasn't as impactful, but man, oh man, to try and do that year in and year out, kudos to him for.
It was.
I'd grow frustrated real quick, I think.
Yeah, it was.
It's fun for those of you who have both wines. If you can do this with us, it's fun now that I've tasted the Syrah to then go back to the blend and try to like find the Syrah in it, and kind of be like, okay, what part of like this wine is that Syrah kind of component and flavor?
What's pulling that characteristic? What's pulling that smell? Suzanne picked out a pretty interesting component of your Syrah when we were tasting it last night that I guess you kind of attributed to like almost like a creme brulee.
Yeah, I was saying
not like the
creamy
creme
part
itself, like the brulee part.
The brulee part, like it was like the burnt sugar a little bit that was like so like predominant for me last night when I was smelling it and tasting it.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of toast do you guys use on your barrels?
So it's a Alain Fouquet barrel, and it's a medium toast with no toasted heads. But it's 1/4 new oak. It's only 4 barrels, so it's.
Yeah, it's funny because none of those attributes I would attribute to like the oak itself, because it doesn't seem like a lot of new oak or heavy toast or a significant percentage of the barrels. But I don't know what else to kind of like pin that characteristic on other than the oak influence. So
yeah, but it's really predominant.
Fascinating.
And this wine, last night I was like, we had some cheese and charcuterie that we were eating, and I was like, because Evan has taught me over the years that like wine and cheese actually isn't a supernatural pairing, and there's a lot of like cheeses and wines, like they just really don't work well together, even though we all like wine and
people like cheese, and so
I've become more sensitive to that, to like, oh yeah, these are both good, they don't enhance each other. But I was like, man, this Syrah goes with every cheese on this plate and every charcuterie on this plate like amazingly. Like it was a really easy like food pairing Syrah, which was a little surprising because it is big and it's punchy and it's like a meal in itself a little bit,
What did you have the the Sin Banderas with? Was that the pizza? I think we had that with the
Maybe.
square pie guys.
Maybe.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty
with
sure that
some
was.
broccoli rabe and sausage, and that was really, and like a spicy honey on it too. That was really nice too.
Yeah, that was. So there's this pizza place.
If you're in San Francisco or ever here,
It's Detroit style pizza, which I don't know that I was familiar with. But they basically like put cheese in the pan, it's deep dish, and then they smush the dough into it. And so there's like not melted, but like fried, crisp, hard pieces of cheese in the crust. And then on, 3 out of the 4 pizzas that this particular place makes, they put
A hot
spiced honey
yeah, it's so
drizzled
good.
on top of it. And it's not super spicy, but it's just enough
Yeah,
that
and it was really nice
with like
that.
some bitter broccoli rabe and the sausage. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys, you guys are really making me want to order Square Guys right now. So
Yeah,
that's
Kristen,
really great for my diet. I appreciate it.
yeah. They've cut down on the grease though, Kristen, so you're better. You're better.
It's
way
super
less
healthy
greasy.
now.
Yeah, way less greasy. But yeah, it's really, I love trying different wines with different foods. It's very fun. So tell us a little bit about the Mourvedre now.
So the Mourvedre, again from the same vineyard. And an interesting fact about the vineyard is it's got all these native tea leaves and native herbs and, that grow in the rose wild. And I feel like because of the heat, it's releasing the oils and all those esters from those plants that are somehow influencing the wine a little bit. And this wine, the Mourvedre, to me, is wild. It's rangy, it's got tannin, it's got game meat. To me, dark game meats going on. It's really kind of, again, I think someone kind of touched on not being able to put their hand on it at one time and just really nail down one characteristic. It just keeps changing, and that's Mourvedre for me. Really dark and rich. How about you? Agreed.
Agreed.
Man, I should have concurred.
What he
Yeah.
said.
Good.
Yeah. Give me this.
Yeah, I definitely recognized the I guess the barrier to accessibility that probably harbors Mourvedre in some ways from becoming something with more mass appeal, because there's the flavor profile and the characteristics of it are not flavors that people are commonly familiar with and they can easily associate with, and they can be like, oh, that's this, and oh, that's this. There's, yeah, like I said at the very beginning, it's bark, and it's like roots, and it's seeds, and it's not like, oh, that's cherries.
Right.
You
It's
know?
funny though, I find that this one is much easier to identify in the blend. Like when I taste this,
Yeah.
and then I taste the blend, I'm
More
like,
than-
okay, I see where that is. That's in there
It's
somewhere.
it's
that
the base.
that varietal.
It's like what the other flavors are like sitting on top of.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Those two wines go together, like she was saying, the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. for
Can't
sure.
have the light without the dark.
boom.
Hey Shelly, tell us a little bit about your story and how you guys got started and what Zanoli is kind of all about.
Okay. So Zanoli, to start, is our last name. And Jimmy is 4th generation San Luis Obispo. And we just wanted to pay homage for his family's name. They go way back here in San Luis Obispo. But going back even further, we met Evan when we lived in Napa. I managed a tiny little winery in Rutherford called William Harrison Winery.
Wow.
And I miss it every day. Love them. And Evan would bring people in, and we just had a really good connection. And then every time I go to San Francisco, I hit him up for the best places to go. And
your pillow.
and my pillow, because
Oh, that's right.
I left my pillow at a hotel in San Francisco. I called Evan, and he got my pillow. and my husband picked it up. It was a very special pillow.
Sounds like it. I'm curious about this pillow now.
I travel everywhere with it. Anyway, so when we moved back. So this is our home. Our family winery is Bella Luna, and his dad and business partner started this back in 1998, and they are in their 70s, and so they asked us to come home in 2015. And so we did. We packed up in 1 month and moved home because we weren't sure what was going to happen to the family business. And all of that in 2015 was a great year to start a winery, just like the other winery. So we started Zinoli. We make 350 cases total. And we've been growing ever since. We started with Chenin Blanc and Syrah. And then we have added Mourvedre and Grenache. We have a Grenache GSM blend ourselves. So these are our 4 wines. We're pretty proud of them. It's taken a bit of time to get there, but see the egg behind my head is actually Bella Luna. Makes a white wine that's made out of the concrete egg. It's,
I have to say, I really love every white wine I've tasted pretty much that's made in a concrete egg. I like really enjoy, like, and I don't know if it's just like, you know,
Perception.
yeah, perception versus reality, but I do feel like it's just a different kind of cleanliness and like a little minerality, and like it just, I really, that's
well, when Jimmy was up in Napa, he worked for Fela, and Fela has quite a few concrete eggs.
They're very proud of the concrete eggs.
Yes, they are. They actually dress them up for Easter.
Oh, that's cute.
Use chalk and they dress them up, and it's kind of fun. So when we came home in 2015, we needed to, you know, Bella Luna didn't have a white wine. So Jimmy said, you know, I want a concrete egg, and let's do Tokai Friuliano and Arnaz and do it in a concrete egg, and it's just fabulous. It's absolutely awesome.
And are those under the Bella Luna label?
Yes. So they're more focused on Italian varietals, and Zinoli is more Rhone style. I think the 2 labels, I sell both labels, and I think they really complement each other.
So we just saw a couple pictures back here of foot stomping, and Evan and I just had an opportunity to do our first foot stomping experience for my birthday earlier this year, which is—
Was it as glamorous as you thought, or was it like,
I mean, it was so much fun.
It was a lot of fun.
But
everybody thinks it's like so romantic, and I'm like, do you know what's in there? And it hurts, and
well, your feet
it does hurt.
More surprisingly, your feet are like ice cubes by the time you get out of there.
Oh my gosh.
Because you picked them in the early morning.
My legs were blue, and not because of the dark, staining of the grapes, is because of my circulation.
Right.
Well, in that picture right there, I am running as fast as I can back and forth so I can get out.
Well, we also were like stubborn because, you know, the other people who were there with us, it was a friend who owns a winery. They were kind of like, I just want to get my feet in and take my picture, and then I'm getting out. You know, and Evan and I were like, no, we work in the industry. We're gonna finish a
What do you actually need these grapes to look like before we get out of here? And he's like, well, the grapes all need to be crushed. And I was like, what do you mean all need to be crushed? He's like, when you push your foot down through them, all the way down to the bottom, I don't want you to feel any grapes.
Right.
And we're like,
Jimmy is a little more gentle when it comes to foot stomping. He just wants me to break the skin and in the beginning. As it goes on, it gets a little more different. But he is very he just wants me to be very, very, light as a feather, which doesn't really happen, but
well, next time you guys need some foot stompers, give us a call and we'll come down, because it was
absolutely
fun. It was pretty fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's our family vineyard in the back of Jimmy right there. We are here at Bella Luna, dry farmed, and we have Cabernet Sauvignon and Sangiovese on the property. So I'm excited in the future to do an Italian tasting with you all.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
To our family. Oh, this is the picture I wanted to show you guys. So this is our, I think it's our Syrah. Lots of limestone in that vineyard. Yeah, this is the Glen Rose Vineyard. It's a pretty popular vineyard here, very sought after. So
Lovely.
This is the west side of Paso, right?
correct. It's
I don't.
what's it called again?
What's that? The Adelaide region
It's out of the region, but it's I thought he was in
in Willow Creek.
Willow Creek. No, okay. Yeah,
No.
it's Adelaide.
Okay.
So yeah.
And there's definitely a difference between the soil and the climate on the west to the east. There's a lot more of that kind of chalky, salacious limestone on the west side and a little bit cooler temperatures, whereas literally just right on the other side of the 101 to the east, as you start to get farther out, it gets hotter and hotter. It gets less rain. There's less limestone. Where we are, fortunately, we're in the most eastern portion of what's called the Templeton Gap. It's another district in the Paso area, and we still here get the end of those diurnal temperature swings. So we're pretty fortunate to be out there. Whereas if you were anywhere north of us, that would have less of an influence. And so it's really cool to have all these different pockets of soils and climates throughout the area. It's been broken up into 11 different districts. So
Sounds like you're like right at the, perfect kind of the perfect storm of the cusp of where it might be too hot, but you're getting just enough of the cooling influence. And
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So we had a question, and Sin Banderas friends, feel free to unmute yourselves and kind of join back in on the conversation, because it's always so crazy. Whenever we host these events, people are like, 90 minutes, that seems like a long time, like our makers.
time
And then
flies.
it's like, oh, we're out of time already. Jesus, like, so especially when it's wine, because Evan has lots to say about wine.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But so I'd love to, we had a question about, did any of the fires impact these wines? And so
Because Washington has had a lot of fires.
yeah, Washington's
in
had a lot of
recent years,
fires.
too.
We've had a lot of fires. So have you guys been impacted by any of the fires at all?
Not us.
No? Good.
No, we're about 4 hours south of Napa and Sacramento. And so we're literally directly in the middle of California, where San Luis Obispo area is. I don't know if everyone knows where that is. So yeah, it takes us 4 hours to get to LA or 4 hours to get to Napa. So.
It's a great pit stop if you're traveling from the Bay Area to Los Angeles.
Yeah, for sure.
Stop in Paso.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
get some wines at Bella Luna and Zanoli,
Come
and
visit us.
yeah, go.
And honestly, places like Paso, Livermore, like some of they're the hidden gems, because they're what Napa and Sonoma were like 30 years ago, and so it's not $50 tasting fees everywhere. You do get to meet the makers a little bit more. They tend to be around a little bit more. They actually want to like share and talk to you versus just like next,
Right.
next,
Move them through.
Yeah. So
We
it's a nice.
tend to do more sit down, private, personal tastings. I try to limit the time, but all of a sudden it's like 4 hours later and I'm like, hey, we're having so much fun. Let's keep going.
Susan, Elise, Jackie, I saw you unmuted yourself. Were you guys, is Yakima Valley, was that an area that was affected by the fires in Washington in the last couple of years?
Yeah, in 2017, it was pretty bad. And we had one fire that came up to one of Owen Rose vineyards. And we did notice some smoke taint in that year, but it blended away just fine. But all of the Sin Banderas stuff was fine. The smoke didn't sit around long enough to be an issue.
I have a question for the ladies of Sin Banderas. Do you guys have Grenache planted anywhere in that area, and any of the other off varietals like Cinsault or Counois, Marsanne, Roussanne, anything?
Well, we don't have any of our own grapes at all. Owen Rowe does have Grenache planted, and we purchased quite a bit of Grenache for Owen Rowe. And same thing for Cinsault. Syncline and the Gorge, they have Counois, right?
They do. They have Counois in Steep Creek Vineyard, which is right on the gorge. And then they actually get some Sanso, I believe, from Bluxom, which is right here in it's a tiny little vineyard here in Yakima Valley. And they do source quite a few grapes here. But that is interesting. We were just having a little side convo about Grenache and its availability. So those are good questions.
Yeah, it's funny, by comparison, I don't feel like you see a lot of Grenache coming out of Washington. I feel like there's a fairly decent number of producers that are producing Syrah, at least. By comparison, Grenache is relatively more readily accessible in Paso Robles, and I'm always struck by that contrast of where you see a grape that is historically known to exist around another grape, and then you find a place that grows one of those grapes, but relative lack of availability of the other.
It's interesting, and I think that's driven by two things: obviously climate and viticulture, assessing where the best place to plant things would be. But it's also driven by popularity and trend, as you know. And we see that on a very shorter timeline here in Yakima Valley with hops. For instance, people want Citra hops, and so they can plant it and reap the rewards very quickly. And you cannot do that very quickly with wine, as you know. But I think there are some areas that are growing. Yakima is interesting because on the Bordeaux latitude, same latitude as the Bordeaux region, but we do tend to have quite a bit of the Rhone varietals grown with great success here.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but I agree. I think it's interesting to see what's planted and what drives that. Is it economic and trend, or is it actually clearly just because that's what thrives in that area?
Well, Grenache has a hard time ripening.
Yeah.
And so that's been a struggle.
It's funny, Jackie, I was just going to ask, what is it about Grenache specifically that isn't conducive to being planted in Yakima?
I think it's just not as hardy to the cold winters.
Oh, because I know it to be like comfortable in the heat, but that makes a lot of sense that it's the other side of that, it's the flip side of that it doesn't.
And there's some vintages where we harvest early, like starting in August, and everything's great. But then there's some years where we get a cold spell in September, October, and then some of those later ripening varietals struggle with it.
Okay.
Whereas in the gorge, it's just a little more temperate, there's a little more of a marine influence, shall we say. And Yakima is just, hot, and then 7:15, 7:30 in the evening turns off like a clock. And it does get chilly here. So,
yeah.
Dry climates like that, as soon as the sun sets, the temperature just like boom.
Yeah, there's no humidity here. Yeah, it's nothing to hold the heat.
It does that too. It's just
Not
that
in
in
the summer.
Phoenix, there's so much freaking asphalt.
yeah, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to keep an eye on time to be respectful for people's dinner plans and all that good stuff. And so hopefully you've opened some delicious bottles.
Or
and now you
ordered
have
square
some
pie
food.
pizza.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. But we're happy to hang out for a little bit longer if people want to chit chat or have questions and unmute themselves and just kind of chit chat with the makers if they're around to stay, or chit chat with us. Evan has lots of good wine knowledge.
I don't know what you're talking
But thank you all for being here so much. And thank you to, Susan, Elise, Jackie from Sin Banderas, to Shelly and Jimmy from Zanoli. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story with us and sharing these delicious wines with us.
Yeah, these are amazing.
They're some
They're so
special
good.
wines. Yeah, I'm really excited about them. We put the links in there. They're both offering some phenomenal kind of fun deals going on.
And brief aside,
Yeah.
in addition to the wines that we were talking about tonight, Sin Banderas also has a lovely dry rosé or
Riesling.
dry Riesling.
It's so good.
And we were talking earlier about like, oh, this wine is pink, it's sweet, and I don't like that kind of stuff. Riesling has that same connotation.
Yeah.
This is not bad.
Yeah, it's great.
This is amazing. And then
We have the Chenin
additionally,
Blanc and the Grenache.
the
blend.
Chenin Blanc and the Grenache predominantly Grenache. What was it? 70?
Yeah.
75 Grenache, 20 Syrah, and 5 Mourvedre.
All of these are available on their websites. We threw the links in the chat there, and we'll also be sending out an email tomorrow with a kind
the
of a
links as
recap
well.
and all those connections as well.
Give them some social media love too.
Yeah.
We love social media love as well. If you took any screenshots for tonight or pictures or anything, tag us in them, tag the winemakers.
You have
in them.
another opportunity coming up here in
Yeah,
about
we're gonna
5
cheers
seconds.
in a second. Yeah.
If you put your thing on gallery view,
True.
we're gonna put our glasses up here
Oh, that's
and take a screenshot
With a nice cheers.
in 3.
Cheers,
two,
everyone.
Hey, yeah,
Thank you
all
for being
right.
here.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
This was a
Pleasure.
pleasure.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.